My earliest memory of Raza Saab was when I was maybe 13 or 14 years old. Uh, my father, uh, who was then the head of the department of the painting department in the Delhi College of Art, he had invited Raza Saab to come and spend a few hours with the students interacting with them. But this was very last minute, and Raza Saab unfortunately had several commitments, and he said that he would not be able to make it. He called up a day or two later, however, and said that he had moved things around and that he would like to come, but he could not spend more than an hour with them. I unfortunately don't remember any of what Raza Saab shared with the students that day, but what I remember with deep clarity was his sense of generosity, with his wisdom, with his time. He certainly stayed on for what was far longer than 1 hour. In fact, he had earlier declined staying for lunch, that my father had suggested that he partake with the senior faculty of the college. But I think the student's arm twisted him. He decided to stay on the condition that he be served the food from the canteen that they were all going to eat from. Two things that I remember very clearly about Raza Saab from that first interaction. First was you were in the presence of a very learned person. The moment he walked into the room, you could tell that this was a highly evolved mind. And the second was he had this very Uncle Tom sort of vibe. At that time, I was reading Uncle Tom's Cabin. And the moment he walked in, I instantly connected him to an Uncle Tom. Someone who had this very protective, avuncular air about him. And as a young person, you wanted him on your side. Someone who would be very protective of his tribe. Over the years, I think both have, in very clear light, been seen as true. His wisdom has been on display in his works that have held us all spellbound at some point or the other. I've had the privilege of placing some of his significant work in several collections worldwide, and that to me will remain a deep honor. Hopefully these will be legacies that will be seen through over the years to follow. And the generosity that I speak of, that's living in the form of the foundation that was founded after his name, which is very true to his spirit. In that context, it's a deep privilege to have it as Mr. Ashok Vajpeyi. He's the founding and managing trustee of the Raza Foundation, a lifelong friend of Raza Saab. Mr. Vajpeyi is someone who I personally refer to as a cultural baron. He's got so many interests in the cultural domain that it becomes very hard to pin him down to one particular specific point. He's an essayist, he's a cultural thinker, he's a very, very reputed name within the literary circle. In fact, just last evening we celebrated the release of his long-awaited Rachnavali, which is a compendium of 13 volumes of poetry spanning 7,000 pages. So, honor to have you here. Sir is in conversation with Atul Dodiya, easily one of the most celebrated contemporary artists. It's a rare privilege to find an artist whose work is so rich in academic history, but doesn't take itself seriously. There's always a little whim and humor in his work. One of the challenges that I've always contended with when it comes to contemporary art is it takes itself very seriously. Atul's work manages that with effortless ease. And as a young artist, I'm sure Atul was also very deeply inspired by Raza Saab. But he's had the distinction and the pleasure of spending several moments with Raza Saab and his wife in India and in France. His connection with the Raza Foundation also is long-standing. He won the Raza Foundation Prize in 2008, and he's recently been inducted onto the Board of Trustees of the Raza Foundation. This promises to be a very, very interesting conversation, and without any ado, sir, I'd like to hand the mic over to you.
Well, friends, it's nice to be here, and nicer to be talking about someone both of us knew and deeply revered for his vision, for his art, for his generosity, as has been mentioned, but above all for the wonderful art that he created. Syed Haider Raza was born on 22nd February 1922 in a small forest village in central India, very near Kanha-Kisli wildlife resort. in a village which has about 10 hutments. And it was there that he was born. He moved on to study in a rural primary school where his teacher, he was a wayward child, his mind could not concentrate on studies. He was more interested in birds and trees and things of that kind. So it was his teacher who put a bindu on the wall of a veranda of the school. And this is happening, mind you, around 1931 or 30. He is a very young child. And he said, you concentrate on this and don't... Now, as some of you would know, this dot on the wall of the veranda came back to him many, many years later in Paris. But anyway, from there he moved on to Damoh, where his father was, and then because he was good at drawing, his drawing teacher suggested to the parents that he should be sent to an art school. In the then Madhya Pradesh, Nagpur was the capital, and there was an art school there. So Raza moved on to the art school. Those days, the only art school which had national prestige was J.J. School of Art. So finally, he moved on to Bombay. He got a scholarship from the government, but he was late in finding admission. So he lived a life working on odd jobs, etc. Now, to cut a long story short, bits, that's a really long story. In 1948 or 47, he was invited by Sheikh Abdullah to Kashmir to show his works and to go around. There was an exhibition that he mounted, and the famous French photographer Henri Cartier-Bresson happened to be in Srinagar, and he saw the exhibition, and he told him, Raza, a young man, you have talent, but your painting lacks construction. And first Raza was amused by this. So what do you mean by a painting and construction? He said, yes, like a building, a painting has to be constructed. You must study Cézanne. With that, Raza returned to Bombay, joined Alliance Française, started learning French. And after learning French for 3 years, applied for a French scholarship. And in 1950, landed in Paris. He remained there for 60 years until I was able to persuade him to come back to his country. But in between, he kept on coming every year for about 2-3 months. He was married to a French artist. Finally, he moved here at the end of 2010 and lived for 5.5 years and died in July 2016. The works that you are seeing here are from these are prints, of course, they are from different periods. And as you can see, there is a distinct Raza imprint, and yet it is difficult to define what it is. We'll come to that later. But we have Atul Dodiya. Atul Dodiya also went to France on a similar scholarship much later and met Raza, and is, of course, as you know, one of the most outstanding contemporary painters. He is having a wonderful exhibition of the work that he did during COVID in the Kinar Nadar Museum. So those of you who are interested in seeing what an artist like him did during Corona, you'll be quite amazed to see the vast number of works that he have done and how different it is. He is one of those artists who keeps on reinventing himself. Most artists feel settled, you know. I have found this style, it works, it sells, or it attracts people. But he's the one who keeps on changing his style, retaining the essential vision, but making those stylistic changes, which is quite amazing. So let's first hear, how do you remember Raza today, Atul? Tell us.
Thank you, Vijay, Arvind, and Ashok ji for this introduction, and thank you all for coming today. First of all, I'm very glad that the works, though it's reproductions, but they're very good quality reproductions. So we are surrounded by these fantastic paintings, and talking about a man is difficult from where to start, actually. One of the words which Ashok ji used is generosity. You know, that is something quite remarkable about Raza Sahab, that he was always available, you know, to young artists. And he was much senior to us, and already such a big name. But luckily, I was very lucky that during my formative years at the Sir J.J. School of Art, when I was a student, you know, I would go to Akbar Padamsi and Tayyab Mehta regularly, and they were also equally generous for their time. And they would advise and they would guide, and they would share things. And somewhere in around October end or November, December, Raza would come from Paris, and we would wait, you know, when he's coming. And generally he would come with few paintings, and those paintings were exhibited at the Kemold Gallery, which was run by Keku and Khorshid Gandhi. And so we would wait for that. And I was a little active student, so I would go to the Jahangir Art Gallery, sit down, and don't go to upstairs in the gallery Kemold, but if Raza is entering, coming, you know, we would say that we are artists, we are students, and will you come to the J.J. School of Art? Okay, you don't have to tell me, because whenever I come to Bombay, I visit the art school where I also studied. So I said, sir, please come. And he came, you know, one day he decided, and he came with Keku Gandhi around 10 o'clock in the morning. And first thing he would do, he did is, you know, touching the stone. It's a 150 years old building now, you know, it's a stone of the building, and not talking to anyone, quite some time, very emotional about his days at the art school. And we feel very proud that we belong to J.J. School of Art, where Akbar Padamsi, Tayyab Mehta, Gaitonde, Souza, Raza, Ara, Ara was not there, but all these, you know, big names in modern Indian art were studied there. So Raza came, and then I told him, sir, will you come to our studio in the classroom? He said, of course, I have come for that. And so I said, share something. And he started talking many things about reading is important, thinking what one is doing in a precise manner, that precision is important. Emotionally, you know, we are charged, instinctively we work, which is all fine, perfect. At the same time, you know, develop your critical sensibility, or be trying to, you know, push us into to articulate things. But one thing at the same time he said, which has stuck in my head in such a big way, that he said in Hindi, he used the phrase, and he said that हमें मजदूर की तरह काम करना है. You know, he said हमें मजदूर की तरह काम करना है. I mean, hard work. There is no option. And that's true. It's true. It's not something which you achieve quickly something, and artist is never satisfied. There is always all the time you want to um, inquiry and changing and why and what and all that happens. So he said that, and then he saw work and he responded whatever works were displayed. And but then he and Keku Gandhi of the gallery Kemol, they both said that, what you people, why don't you come tomorrow? Tomorrow is my opening at the Kemol gallery. So we were thrilled. At the same time, very feeling awkward because young students were not generally invited to the opening, where collectors and other people they come and drinks are served and all that thing. So I asked him, sir, can we come? He said, of course, you people should be there. So of course we reached much well in time, and we were looking at the painting. And one thing, he has a habit of putting his hand on the shoulder. He would put his hand on my shoulder, and he would take me around. And that touch was so moving and important that we felt, oh, he's so humble and he talks to me like a friend. And then every time when Raza came, we would go to see the show. And that period particularly, after 68, there was in Taj Hotel in Bombay, near the pool, there is a lobby, and we used to go there because there used to be Taj Art Gallery as well. And some general shows used to happen there, but one large horizontal brown painting which used to be on a permanent collection from 1968. Just to see that painting, we would again and again go there. Then there is a TIFR, Tata Institute of Fundamental Research in Navy Nagar, where it's not allowed for general public or anyone to enter in that, because all kind of research is happening there. But they have a huge collection. Scientist Homi Bhabha had created a beautiful collection of modern Indian painters, and there were also some Raza, which we would say that we are a student, we would have to fill a form, show the student identity card, and then go again and again. And then there was a Jahangir Nicholson, who had some beautiful works in his collection at the NCPA. Then he has to have a space in the National Center for Performing Arts on Nariman Point, and we again go there. And the Raza paintings were growing. So 68 onwards, the kind of work which happened, and particularly the work which are my favorite, probably something like this, this one, the red thing, and more abstract. And gradually, of course, the geometry came, which Ashok ji would talk about that as well. But before that, I must say that in 1989, French government was celebrating 300 years of freedom, and there were many events were happening. So one of the event was holding a show of young Indian artists in Delhi, and at the Lalit Kala Academy venue, and sponsored by Sanskriti Pratishthan and French Embassy. They asked 3 artists from India who had a relationship with France. They had lived there or come back, or Raza Sahab was still there. So as a commissioner, and each artist was supposed to give 5 names of young artists. So there was Akbar Padamsi, Ram Kumar, and Raza. These 3 people were there. And 15 artists were chosen, and the exhibition happened. And out of that exhibition, 1 artist would go on a full-fledged scholarship, on a French government scholarship to Paris. And unanimously, all 3 selected me. So I was thrilled, extremely happy. But before going, I also went to Alliance Française to study French language, and Raza Sahab would write me a letter. And he told me that since you are coming, there is and you are a figurative painter. Raza Sahab's work is abstract. But he related with my work, and he said, since you are a figure in the kind of figuration you have, I am sure you like the great French modern artist called Balthus. And he was absolutely right, because Balthus is one of my favorite painters. So he said Balthus' student is also a senior artist and well-known artist called Pierre Caron. He said, he is teaching there. So you have to select a professor when you go to the art school. So you better go to him. This is my advice. I said, fine, definitely, I would just do that. And that's how we went. So when we went there, I was married, just married, and my wife Anju, who is also an artist, we both went there. And we settled. Raza Sahib was not in Paris then. He was in Gorbio, in south of France, in his studio in south of France. So I wrote to him. He told me that he will be back with Janine, his wife, in some time in October. So October, actually I reached on the 2nd October, but October end or something. And he came and he said, why don't you come home in the evening? So we were very excited, obviously, that going to his studio, home, all. And first thing he noticed, that he said, this is the jacket you wear? It was a thin jacket, small, and this is not a right jacket for Paris winter. And he went and brought a overcoat, woolen overcoat of his own, and said, this is the one which you have to wear. And will you believe that the whole year, whenever during the winter time, and then also I went to London during one of the trips there, I was wearing Raza's coat. So Mani Kaul has made a film called Naukar Ki Kameez. I want to make a film about Raza's coat. And and then so many evenings he would invite us for drink, and sometime have dinner, and so we would immediately, Anju and I, we would go. And sometimes they had Janine and Raza has a cat. The cat's name was Wawa. So this, for Wawa, she would say that, Anju, why don't you go, and the special food which you get for the pets, we would go and get it. And then once I saw Raza painting, it was a long vertical painting with precise grid, the kind of things which you see in one of these. And he started painting. I said, sir, you are painting, so shall we stay? He said, nahi, baitho, koi baat nahi. And I said, there's nothing like that. And he was already had done some part, and rest of the canvas was blank. Generally what we do, when we do, we fill it up overall, and then we go back to certain area, then you come back to some area, then let it dry for some day. Instead of here, this man, he started painting from the top and went on finishing till in the bottom. And the painting was perfect. Generally what happens that then you change, and you think, but he finished the painting. And the most important thing, I would say, is that, the way he would hold the brush, his fingers, and the way he would mix the paint, and the way he would apply, those were the ultimate mudras, I would say, as we have in our classical Indian dance. It was so elegant, it was so, rhythmic and so beautiful that, I was just stunned by the whole thing. And in the studio space, so many books in Hindi language. There were many rosaries of different types, some artifacts, statues from India, textile were there, and he would speak in fluent English. His writing, yesterday Ashok was saying, either in English, he was fluent in French, and he was fluent in Devanagari, Hindi. And it was so beautiful. I said, so many things. He's so good in his talking, writing, the way he would express, the way he paints. So, but the most important thing, I feel about his concern for young artists. And first I thought maybe it's just with me, that he is so friendly. But gradually I realized that he would come and he would talk to all the younger people. Then there are people, in Madhya Pradesh and Bhopal or other places. He would kind of specially call them, try to see their work, try to buy their work. It's such an encouragement. Just imagine that, you are struggling and there is not yet, you are not yet arrived or anything, and your work is acquired by S.H. Raza. I mean, that's such a, what a, spirit, and what a confidence, one gets. So this is something which is not there. I mean, I don't want to compare Hussain Saab and Raza Saab or Akbar and Tayyab and all, but always, Akbar and Tayyab were available. Hussain Saab was always moving. He was never at one place. You see him in Bombay and he's not in Bombay. He tells that he will be in London and he would be in Dubai. He was so totally different. But with Raza, he would, when he says that he's coming, he comes. He is there. He is there for you. And very carefully would listen and talk. And his Gandhi is something, which is very important to me as a person, as a great statesman, leader. And I have done a series of paintings on Gandhi. And about Gandhiji, the feeling which Raza had, that I got much later to know. And there is a lot of paintings, with the quotation and statements which are there in Raza's painting. But another thing that, I am very fond of literature, particularly poetry. So I read, and I thought that in our miniature paintings, even in Persian miniature, or even the 6th or 7th century Chinese calligraphy, there is a text. What if I use the text and do a shall I continue or no, please. Yeah. So use the text in my painting, and but much before I have seen Raza Saab's painting, and the text was always there. There is one large painting which came from Paris. It was rolled about 8 feet by 5.5 feet. Kemol Gallery was very small upstairs, about Jahangir Art Gallery in those days. So, this painting was stretched, and I was one of the fortunate ones who was present there when it was opened up and it was, stretched. And it has a text which was actually one of the lines from the poem from Ashok ji, and it says, "Ma, मैं लौट के आऊँगा तो क्या लाऊँगा." That was the text was there. Now I see this, text thing is something as a figurative element actually. Because, text means, it's a specific language. It says something very specific. And in the context of, the quite wild abstraction, and you read and you see. Of course, reading and seeing happen simultaneously. You can't read without seeing. That's there. But so this text and, and the image together, which inspired me in a big way, and always felt the festive and Indian, the Rajput miniatures and Pahadi miniature, those colors, everything. So Raza, though, his sensibility got developed in such a sharp manner with French aesthetics, the great French masters. Living in Paris means it's unbelievable. But at the same time, hardcore Indian in the heart and in his work. It's the work speaks for itself, those elements. And so the language came in my work, and often he would use a line from a poetry, which he just want to have a text. And for that, often he would go to a poem, and which was one of the inspiration for my own text-based works, yeah. And then when he returned, thanks to Ashok ji and friends, that he came, he stayed here, and the foundation was built, and uh, all the activities which the Raza Foundation is doing, huge 190 publication books and all that thing, that Raza Sahab saw also a lot of this, and he would come down, though quite fragile in later years, but he would come in a very elegant suit and a very stylish man with a glass of red wine in his hand, and we would sit and talk and chat. He would listen, and as if I'm sitting next, again he would put a hand in his shoulder, and that's the way he was. It was quite a remarkable man and a great painter.
Well, you can't normally hear a painter talk about another painter. Usually talking is done by others who are not painters. But this is, as you see, is a very personal tribute, and it makes you see what Raza was all about. It was not just a painter, but it was also... I happened to come to know him by the sheer but a beautiful accident of his being from Madhya Pradesh. And I was in Madhya Pradesh, and I had started my cultural rights, and we were trying to honor all those who belong to Madhya Pradesh who may not be in Madhya Pradesh. So in that search, Raza was an obvious choice. So I did not know him. I wrote him a letter and invited him to Bhopal to come with a show. I got a very encouraging response, and he came. He came, like you said, rolled sort of paintings, and in 2 days he brought, that stapler or whatever, something which was not, those kinds of things were not known in Bhopal, and he left them behind with us. He used them later. What was interesting was that in that exhibition that we finally mounted, I was a civil servant, so I had fellow civil servants who of course had no taste for art, but were vulnerable to me. So I told them, they were heading corporations, Audyogik Vikas Corporation, Transport Corporation. If you buy a painting, so they bought it. Now in 79, for a princely sum of 45,000 rupees, all the works were sold. And Raza Sahab said, no, I'm not going to take this money. You should institute an award, an annual award for poetry and painting. So that's how we did. But what was most amazing, that this man, who had by 1980 has already lived in France for 30 years, spoke such wonderful Hindi without using a single English word. A single, absolutely saaf suthri Hindi. He was of course very good at French, and of course, what is amazing is in 1954-55, when he's quoting his French wife, he's writing love letters, which we have published. And the title is, I Shall Bring My Own Time. She did. And in that situation, he's quoting Paul Baudelaire. I know people whom they are trying to win a lady, he does all these things. But that he knew Baudelaire, he had passed through immatriculation. And diploma. And then I also discovered that he announced it most passionately that my mother tongue is Hindi. So I don't want any one of you to talk to me in a language other than Hindi. क्योंकि हम लोग गोरी चमड़ी देखते हैं तो हमको लगता है कि तो अंग्रेजी में ही बात करना चाहिए. तो nobody talked to him, he talked in Hindi. And then started a friendship with Raza. One of my jobs every year when I will go to Europe, I'll make it a point to go to Paris to meet him for a couple of days, spend time with him and all that, was to bring new books of Hindi poetry. Now the interesting thing is that I think in about 100 canvases, he has used Devanagari script.
Yes.
And these are lines from Vedas, from Upanishad, from Kabir, from Tulsi, from Sur, from Meera, from Mir and Ghalib, from Faiz, from Sahir Ludhianvi, from Agge, from Mukti Bodh, even from me. So he used these, and he never used a French word on his paintings, never inscribed anything other than Hindi. The only time he once used English was that he made a work which are words from Gandhiji. Yes. And since they were in English, they are in English. That's all. He had never used it. This is very amazing. Our friendship, therefore, became deeper and deeper, and we used to spend time. And he was very keen to do something for the younger people. So finally in 2002, near about, yes, I think, I spent 3 quarrelsome evenings with him in his house. I had taken a document of registration. Incidentally, he retained his Indian passport all through. He never accepted French nationality, duality, etc. No, not for him. He said, no, I'm an Indian, I want to die as an Indian, so I have my Indian passport. The thing that sort of worked was that we were calling it Raza Foundation. And he had deeply ethical objection to this. He said, मैं पैसे दूं और मैं अपने नाम, ये तो बहुत ही वाहियात बात है. तो मैंने उनको ये समझाने की कोशिश की कि हुजूर, आपका नाम एक ब्रांड है, हम उसको कहेंगे फाउंडेशन फॉर आर्ट्स, तो उसके वो बनता नहीं, कोई, it doesn't resonate. So after 3rd evening, and I have to leave the next morning, more under, I think, influence of liquor, then being convinced my argument, he said, अच्छा लाओ मैं दस्तखत कर देता हूँ. That's how Raza Foundation was born. But then, to cut a long story short, when he came back here, we revived it, and before COVID intervened, but even during COVID 2 years, we have done something like 95 events, but mostly devoted to younger people as he wanted. But before that, we had started doing around 100 events a year in 20 cities of India. Small cities and big cities. We have collaborated with various organizations. We took a policy decision that we will not ask for assistance either from government or from corporates. We will do what we want to do within the money that we have. So we have roughly an annual budget of about 2 crores, which is enough for what we want to do. But that's part. Now, come back to Raza. Even while he was infirm, already when he arrived here, he was 90-year-old. But please remember that most progressives had a very long life. This is the only group which lived so long. Hussain, 94, or 95, 96, I think. Only Tayyab and I think Gaitonde died a little prematurely. But Ram Kumar, 90 plus. Krishan Khanna, already 96th here. Akbar, 90 plus. Raza, 94 plus. These were amazing people. They were together and yet they were so different from each other. Completely, you could immediately see this is Ram Kumar, this is Tayyab, this is Raza, this is Hussain. They each developed a different style, a different vision, and yet they were great friends. And part of our celebration of Raza 100 was also to celebrate his friends. We started with Krishan Khanna, luckily at that time, COVID was not so severe. But then, over the year, we are celebrating Sousa in Goa, and we hope to celebrate Akbar, Gaitonde, etc. During the year. Tomorrow, I think perhaps historically, the first ever exhibition of 100 young artists called Yuva Sambhav is opening in Delhi at 5 venues simultaneously. That is Triveni, Visual Art Gallery, India Habitat Center, Bikaner House, Alliance Francaise, and India International Center. We have selected 100 artists from all parts of India who are going to show, and it's opening timings have. So when you have some time and you are in Delhi, do peep in. And maybe you'll like a work of a young artist, and you never know what that young artist ultimately turn out to be. The painting which uses my line, and which is one of the iconic paintings of Raza, I wrote a poem when I was appearing for the civil service exam. And I was quite convinced that I'm not going to make it. It is, I don't know whether fortunate or unfortunate that I made it. But I was quite convinced. So I wrote a poem, Ma laut kar jab aunga, kya launga. I had come from a small town, Sagar, and I have landed up in St. Stephen's. And I was quite convinced that I'm not going to make it. So I wrote that poem. The poem is written for my mother and for my own failure to fill up the expectation that my mother had that I will become a civil servant. But Raza used it as a love letter to his country. When I return, what do I bring? I mean, in the sense of, so he would ring me up, describe to me the painting, and say that I am wanting to use this word on it, or this line on it. What do you think? And then sometimes I would say, keep it, why this or why that, and things of that kind. So it became a very, very close friendship. And Raza was, he, as he mentioned, he used to buy young painters' work, whom he liked. He would sit on the floor, on his knees, and he'll have these paintings of young people. And then he will tell them, ये आप क्या कर रहे हैं? ये भी कर रहे हो, वो भी कर रहे हो, वो भी कर रहे हो, तो तय तो करो कि कहाँ जाओगे? You know, that fellow who is already overwhelmed by the fact that Raza is sitting and watching. And sometimes when he likes the work, अच्छा कितने का है ये? अब वो बेचारा, the fellow has the first time somebody is buying. So he would मतलब बेचारा घबरा के हाँ बताओ, अब वो कहेगा 5,000. शुरू से 5,000 लोगे तो बाद में पछताओगे. 10,000 में लेता हूं मैं. Things of that kind. There was a once he came, there was an art gal, what is it called in Connaught Place? Art India? Art India? Art Today. Art Today. Yeah. So there was an exhibition of Seema Ghuraiya, who unfortunately died. So big exhibition, and it was the opening, and Raza Sahab said, चलिए चलते हैं. हम लोग गए तो एक बड़ी पेंटिंग उनको अच्छी लगी. एक बार देखा, फिर गए, फिर दूसरी बार इधर फिर गए, फिर मुझे बुलाया कि ये व्हाट डू यू थिंक ऑफ दिस. हाँ बहुत अच्छी है, ले लें. दे दीजिए. तो पूरी, क्या पूरी नाम था उनका, रेखापुरी. हाँ, रेखापुरी थी वहाँ. तो उनसे पूछा कि ये कितने की है. बताया कि 1.25 लाख की. यू नो ऑफ दोज डेज प्राइसेस पे 1.25 लाख समथिंग. ही सेड हाँ हाँ चलो, एक शर्त है मैं लूंगा कि आप ये पूरा पैसा बिना अपना गैलरी कमीशन लिए आर्टिस्ट को दे देंगे. तो अब हाँ हाँ हम दे देंगे, क्यों नहीं दे देंगे. तो 1.5 लाख में उन्होंने खरीद ली. अब वो हमारे पास अभी भी है, इतनी बड़ी है उसको लगाने की जगह. अपने साथ वो बहुत सारी पेंटिंग्स ले गए थे, छोटे लोग, मतलब यंग लोगों की. एंड गर्मियों में एक आर्ट सेंटर बना, उसमें उन्होंने वो, there are young painters shown in south of France permanently in that museum. Sometimes there are all kinds of contradictions in which we live. I may be a good poet, but I may be quite a vicious man. Vicious men also write good poetry. I mean, there is no such thing as goodness all along, right? There could be contradictions. But if there was a man without contradictions of this kind, it was Raza, who was generous to the core. I was sitting with him. You know, the usual core was that he will be working. I will be called by him at about 6 o'clock. मैंने अपना काम खत्म कर लिया, आइए. And he would order some what do you say, single malt for me and a glass of red wine for himself. And then he would say, we'll talk. Sometimes for half an hour we're sitting without talking. कोई बात करने की जरूरत नहीं, चुप है. One day, Namita Gokhale, who is the organizer of Jaipur Literature Festival, rang me up, and I was sitting with Raza. Those days, these kinds of phones were not there, you know. At least I was not having this. So I was talking to him. He said, there is a Dalit writer who is suffering from cancer, and some money is required. Can some money be got from government? I said, yes, of course. If 5-7 of us write a petition to government, maybe some money will be available. He said, ठीक है, उनका एक मैं दस्तखत कर दूंगा, आप 2-4 से बात कर लीजिए. After I had put the phone down, राजा साहब ने कहा, क्या बात है, किससे बात कर रहे थे आप? मैंने कहा कि वो एक राइट, क्या हुआ उनको कैंसर. तो तब ने कहा उनको क्यों फोन करिए, कहिए अभी ले जाए 1 लाख रुपया. He doesn't know who he is. He just trusted my word. He said, yes. I rang up Namita Gokhale कि भाई अभी 1 लाख तो हमने कर दिया. कहले कैसे? मैंने कहा राजा साहब ने सुना तो उन्होंने कर दिया. He was a spontaneous in behavior. He used to come to India International Center, and also have seen it in his own vicinity in Paris. If he goes to a restaurant, everybody in the restaurant would start paying attention to him as if an Arab king or sheikh has come. Because he would tip so generously, so much. You know, artists in India, luckily, now have a lot of money. But that lot of money is shared at best by their families or maybe friends. Very few of them are able to part with their money for others. And Raza was a singular example of having done that. So, what you're seeing is not merely the work of an artist. you're also seeing the work of a very noble man, a man who was generous, and a man who loved his country and his people so much. I'll end up by making you ponder over this. He was very fond of Narmada, the river, and he would never say Narmada, he'll say Narmada ji. And Narmada has a legend that while all pious or sacred rivers have tirthas on one side, you know, if you look at Ganga, there'll be tirthas on one side. Banaras, you have something on the whole ghat side, on this side. On the other side, nothing. This is true about most of the so-called sacred rivers. It's so said about Narmada, the Narmada is Ubhay Tata Tirtha. That is, on both sides of the bank, there are tirthas. There are temples and places of worship. Sometimes I think Raza himself was a Ubhay Tata Tirth. India, France. Poetry, painting, miniature traditions, modern French plastic. And one can go on. So there is Ubhay Tata Tirth. He was a man who had creativity and one man who above everything else almost worshipped creativity wherever he found it, wherever he discovered it. And he has such an eye to discover that, and a man who painted, every time he used to go, he used to कुछ बुदबुदाते से थे. तो मैंने तो उनको बहुत बार पेंटिंग करते देखा, मैं उनके साथ ही रुका होता था. तो एक बार मैंने पूछा कि आप कुछ मंत्र जाप करते हैं, क्या करते हैं? बोले नो, I recite the French version of 2 lines of Rilke. Rilke, a German poet, a great 20th century, early 20th century poet. And the lines used to say, let me hear the inaudible inner voice of mine. Inaudible inner voice of mine. Let me hear. So he used to say कि मैं पेंट करता हूँ तो मुझे अंदर की आवाज़ सुनाई देनी चाहिए, मैं इसलिए प्रार्थना करता हूँ. And sometimes, you know, poets are fond of metaphors. You know, we can't talk straight, although I'm talking straight. But I would say all Raza's paintings can be seen as love letters to the world in one way. On the other hand, they can be seen as prayers for grace. He was a trilingual man, English, French, Hindi, but he was also a tri-religious man. He would go to a mosque, to a temple, and to a church. When he came here, we had to locate a church for him, we had to locate a temple for him, and we had to locate a mosque for him. And he was a man of faith. Imagine, this is another Ubhay Tata Tirth. Here is a man of faith, and here is a man who has no belief. I don't have the gift of belief. But we remained friends because in an ultimate sense, I think creativity is the only God we have. And finally, it was Raza who partook of creativity and therefore partook of a bit of godliness. Thank you. If there are any comments or questions, please feel free. You can take one of the knives.
Thank you.
Please go ahead. Yes?
It's just that we are so thankful. I'm feeling so thankful and humbled that I've come here. I chose to come here from south of Delhi here. So I'm so happy. Like I loved Raza and now I love him all the more. And it was
Well,
very inspiring. Really thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You have a question?
Hello. Hello. Yeah, sorry. So I actually don't know who Raza is. I've heard the name, but I don't know their work, etc. But from how you have spoken about them, it seems like a person who has a lot of clarity about the world they exist
I
in.
can't hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Man of 82, my dear.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know who Raza is.
Yeah.
I've heard the name, but I don't know their work. I'm not familiar with them. But how you've spoken about them, it seems like a man who has a lot of clarity in their worldview. So I want to understand what was their thoughts. You've talked about their thoughts. What was their worldview, and how could you see it develop over time? And could you give some insight into their worldview and how it developed with time?
I don't know what you mean by the worldview. We have given you certain aspects of that worldview. His devotion to art, his insistence on precision, hard work, that art is not something which can be done easily. Life, he loved good things of life, including wine, women, etc. He was always enjoyed the feminine company. He had a vision of life which I would say was very pluralistic. It was a vision of life in which elements of Islam, elements of Christianity, and elements of Hinduism have all got enmeshed into his own personal vision. He was the one who, I think, celebrated life, and yet in his own distinctive, unique style, questioned the world. When things were very figurative, and even the figurative was the dominant mode, as it were, he decided to be abstract, because he wanted to convey not something very easily visible. He wanted you to do a bit of effort to dig out meanings, and all this would amount to a worldview, I hope. Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, I hope I'm audible, sir. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, first of all, sir. We lived Raza's life for, I would say, last 60, 70 minutes. Thank you so much. So, sir, very incidental. Before I came in for this, I met someone and we were talking about something like a writer's block. For someone like a Raza to have such a long, illustrious career, did he also have things like those, a painter's block? If at all he had one, how did he overcome that, or that's just a modern concept?
Well, I don't know what you mean by a painter's block, but in late 70s, by which he had established himself as a painter, and he was known to be a painter of the Parisian school, École de Paris, which was the dominant. He started thinking that, but where am I in this? Where is India in this? I am painting like a Frenchman. And that started troubling him. So what he did, he started thinking, what do I do? It is then that he went back remembering that dot put by his school teacher on this veranda wall. And suddenly it occurred to him that there are metaphysical concepts in Indian tradition which need to be visually explored. So if you look at the titles Kundalini, Prakriti and Purush, Surya Namaskar, etc. Now, all this is his personal language. There was no such language, and he remembered, he was very fond of Rajasthan, and he went there, and there are several paintings. One of the problems of a Raza specialist is that there will be 7 paintings with the same name, like Rajasthan, for instance, like La Terre, the Zameen, earth, La Terre, La Nuit, 3 or 4 or 5. So the notion that he built on was that a great artist has to have a personal style. All kinds of elements will go into it. Like each one of them had, Hussain had, and Tayyab had, and each one has a distinct style. Now that is distinct style is born out of many things. It's not merely his wish or his competence or his vision influences that he allows to happen, and inspiration that he can look forward to. In his case, poetry itself was a source of inspiration. So all these factors constituted the kind of things that he did. At one time, he told me, this was towards 2009 or so, that now I don't want to paint. He is known as a master colorist. You see color all around. I don't want to paint color anymore. I want to paint white on white. Fine. So if you look, those ones there, the shades of gray and white. When he came back here and he started painting, he was again doing. So I one day told him, कि आपने तो कहा था कि आप white पर white करेंगे, now you are again. He said, ये रंग पीछा नहीं छोड़ते ना. So, it's a way of saying that, for a painter, I dare say in the presence of a outstanding painter, for a painter, colors are also life. They are living. They talk to each other. A color recalls another color. A color sometimes beckons another color. So, color itself, the material itself by which art is created, has its own existence. And to a certain extent, there is a point where colors exercise a pressure which is irresistible. I'm reminded of उस्ताद अली अकबर खां. उन्होंने एक बार टेलीविज़न पे एक इंटरव्यू में कहा कि थोड़ी देर तो मैं सरोद बजाता हूँ, फिर सरोद मुझे बजाने लगती है और फिर मुझे पता नहीं चलता क्या हो रहा है. About, you see, we have a concept in the Indian tradition, अविचारित का रमणीय. The beauty of something unpredictable or unthinkable. आपने सोचा नहीं था कि आप ये करने जा रहे हैं, तो वो अप्रत्याशित है, उसका रमणीय, उसका मतलब the beauty of it. A lot of great art consists of this very pleasurable accident of the unexpected. Artists remain an artist as long as he has a feeling that there is a mystery to be addressed. If the sense of mystery and the sense of surprise or astonishment go away from an artist's life or vision or practice, he is finished.
Thank you.
Yeah, what Ashokji said, I'm reminded of a quotation by one of the greatest artists of our time, the American artist. His name is Bruce Nauman. Bruce Nauman is a great American artist, and he said that it is believed that art is a matter of life and death. This may sound melodramatic, but it is true. So this is what he said. And then you were talking about the block. It's true. When one paints in a certain, there is an inner need, of an artist that suggests that you want to move. Like he said that after color, he wanted to do white on white. But then each individual painting has another problem. That when you resolve that, it's such a revelation that nothing, if you see this painting, it's probably a basic division he may have in his head. But all the inside thing, these are all must have happened in the process. And in that process, what kind of a state of mind this artist must be, that is, we can't even imagine. It's that kind of a thing. And I think probably, like Raza Sahib, I also believe in divinity. And I feel that it is those moments, where you forget. It's very rarely it happens, but it happened in the process of painting or a creation that you forget yourself. And those moments are the real achievement, actually.
As they say, like, that's the time probably that you are one with the universe.
Yeah.
And that essentially, I think,
Probably.
is
Yeah,
the beauty.
yeah, yeah.
Because everyone else knows everything else. Only in very few moments.
Yeah.
सर जैसे आपने कहा कि पहले हम सितार को बजाते हैं, सितार फिर हमें बजाते हैं, फिर पता नहीं क्या होता है. That's the time that you're in oneness with the universe, that the audience would probably strive for. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add a little and finish. You see, colors by themselves, unlike words, as in music, notes by themselves have no inherent meaning. Colors have no meaning. Surs, notes have no meaning. Meaning is invested and created by art. So, same color may give a indication to someone, an artist, of a certain emotion. To another one, it will not. So, colors become meaningful. We have colors all along in our life, here and there, but not all of them are meaningful. But colors, as they come in art, start gaining meaning, and that meaning is what the artist has been able to create. There lies the wonder of it all. Each painting is a complete work, but each painting, in a certain sense, is a mystery unresolved. So the meaning will never be exhausted. You will have different kinds of meanings by different kinds of people. मैं कभी कभी कविता के बारे में ये कहता हूँ कि कविता तो आधा सच है. वो पूरा सच तब होता है जब पढ़ने वाला, सुनने वाला या रसिक जो है उसमें थोड़ा सा अपना सच मिलाता है. और हम में से ज़्यादातर को अपना सच का सामना करने की ताब नहीं है. You know, we live in delusions, great delusions or big delusions, small delusions. So it's an effort. Art requires an effort. It requires empathy. It requires a certain vulnerability. It requires a certain openness. It requires that you're willing to be overwhelmed and suspend yourself for a while. You can't be thinking all the time, I'm Ashok Vajpeyi. If I'm thinking all the time, I'm Ashok Vajpeyi seeing this, I'm Ashok Vajpeyi seeing that, it will be demeaning. But the moment I face important art, I forget who the deuce I am. I am the one who is there. That's why the masters said right in the beginning, Eko ham bahusyam. We are one. I am one, but I am so many. In this so manyness is our oneness. Incidentally, which is politically under attack at the moment.
Yeah, so the medium of acrylic, the way he used it, that's quite remarkable. And in my opinion, I always felt, from the very beginning, that see today, like when we say abstract painting or abstract expressionism, as they call it in America, and the masters who were the pioneers of Mark Rothko and William de Kooning, Jackson Pollock was there, and Franz Klein, and many others, Philip Gaston. I think if these people are really great, and they are great, they are really Robert Motherwell, great masters, but I feel Raza is equal to this world masters of abstract painting. And then of course he is Indian. He lived also like an Indian in France, and I don't know, but the kind of recognition he should have all over, I mean, as a painter, then I feel, no, I am not interested in that. It's okay, whether he is known the way de Kooning is known or Rothko is known. And maybe of course, they were pioneers and they started in late 40s there, and maybe Raza Sahib was 20 years later. But that ultimately, that doesn't matter. What matters is the quality of the work. And this is something unique, yeah. Thank you so much.